First of all, Meredith, just what do you do?
I do many things. Thank you so much for having me on the program. I am living a wonderful life in Paris, but mostly I'm focused on photography. I'm a fine art photographer and an instructor of photography, and I'm the director of several photographic competitions because I think it's great to support unrecognized talent in the world of photography.
What is OIC Moments?
OIC Moments is a blog, is a publishing company that is really about discovery. It's really about the wonderful moments we have in life where we say, oh, I see, that's really interesting, or, oh, I did not know that. It's about life, it's about culture, it's about creativity. And the stories range from everything from, I just wrote a story on the royal mole catcher of Versailles Palace, to creative aspects in the world, to cultures and how different cultures celebrate different kinds of events.
Meredith, what was the inspiration behind the Blind Sight Photography Contest?
The initial inspiration was actually an assignment I gave some of my high school students last summer. I wanted them to experience photography through senses other than sight. And I thought that the idea of connecting with something through as many senses as possible would really free their creativity. And it did. The photographs were wonderful. And in doing that, I myself researched blind and visually impaired photographers and was amazed and rewarded that there are so many talented blind and visually photographers out in the world. And so I began a study of that. And when I wrote an article for OIC Moments about two blind photographers that really inspired me, we decided wouldn't it be wonderful to extend this invitation for other blind and visually impaired photographers to submit their work to be seen by the world, and also for sighted photographers to think about how they might capture a moment without using their sight. In other words, connecting with the subject with senses other than sight. And the results were incredible.
Could you go into more detail about what is meant by this statement, seeing is about much more than sight?
I think with any creative process, the seed of creativity actually comes from within. And I think any creative artist will talk about how they can actually visualize without seeing, how they can actually create the end product of their creativity without actually doing it or seeing it or feeling it. It really comes from within. And so I think this idea of seeing without sight has two meanings. One is a very literal meaning that in this particular competition or when you're attempting to make photographs without seeing, you're using other senses. But it also has to do with the creative process. One of the blind photographers that I wrote the article about, Pete Eckert, says he's a very visual person. He just can't see.
Meredith, when it came to this contest, what were some of the parameters that you used, or what were some of the qualifications for entering the contest?
The main qualification was, and we had to depend on our photographer's honesty, the main qualification was you had to make the photograph without sight. You could use a sighted friend, or if you were a sighted photographer, you could use your own sight to make the selection of what photographs you would enter in the competition. But at the moment of capture, at the moment you click the shutter, you could not be using your eyes. The other parameter was you could not crop or manipulate the photographs in any way. So we were really talking about what was it that was happening at the moment when you click the shutter.
Could you tell us a few things about Bruce Hall?
Yeah, Bruce Hall was really an inspiration to me, and we've had quite a wonderful correspondence since I introduced myself via email when I was interviewing him for the first article. He's a photographer a person who, as a child, had limited sight, and he lived with that. He experienced the world with that limited vision. And then one day he was looking through a telescope, and he, for the first time, saw a star. And he realized that with the use of tools like a telescope, like a camera, like an enhanced computer screen, he realized that with the use of these kinds of tools, he could actually intensify his vision. And that's when he really got into photography, because that's one way to intensify his vision. He's visually impaired. He can see forms, he can see light and dark, as I understand it, but he then when he gets back to the computer, he enhances these images and really works with them. He's done some wonderful underwater photography where he's been able to generally see things like shells and urchins and some of those interesting, graphically beautiful underwater creatures. And then when he comes back to his computer, he can select and enhance. He's also done some wonderful work with his children, one of whom is autistic, and so he experiences and explores that particular side of his children with his camera.
Meredith, as best you can on the radio, could you describe some of the winning photos of the contest?
Yes. Let me think about how I can put these into words. It's more about the process, I think. There were two phases to the jurying of this competition. In the first phase, the photos were actually put on Facebook, and so people got to vote for them. And the top 10 winners on Facebook were then presented to the jury, and the jury selected 3 winners from that group. The first place winner was really a beautiful photograph by a gentleman from Uzbekistan who was actually working on a project called One Day, where a blind photographer and a sighted photographer worked together to explore their environment. And Vitaly Kim was the blind photographer in his pair. And his photograph is wonderful. It's a black and white photograph. It's a black and white photograph that appears to be his neighborhood. There's a car and a street light. It's taken at night. And what I loved about the photograph was it's completely timeless. I can't tell what year it is. It could be 1920. It could be the year 2000. And because it's in Uzbekistan, it's difficult to tell what year it is. The car looks to be about a 1950s car, actually. But I loved the fact that the composition is slightly atypical. The fact that the composition doesn't follow rules, and because of that, it becomes a very interesting photograph. The second place winner was someone who was also a blind photographer, who was traveling with her family in Singapore, I believe, and they were at statues that were a tourist attraction, and the rest of her family was making photographs of these statues, and she had them help her position herself. And so in her photograph are not only the statues, but are her family taking pictures of the statue. It's great with an iPhone and with a camera. It's sort of a wonderful integration of the past and a country that has a rich culture, rich cultural heritage, and the present because they're using iPhones and current cameras. And the third place winner was a sighted photographer, Betsy Van D from Chicago, and she had her husband take her out into the woods, blindfolded, and sort of tell her where there might be something interesting to shoot. And her photograph is a very ominous photograph of a grill, of a grill that you might grill hot dogs and hamburgers on that has sort of been abandoned in the woods, and it's fallen over and it's starting to rust and rot, and it becomes very interesting because you're in the wilderness and here is this dead grill.
Meredith, how can our listeners find out more information about OIC Moments?
The best way is to just Google OIC Moments, or the URL is www.oh-i-see.com/blog. So take a look.
Thank you for being with us today. We've been speaking with Meredith Mullins. One spells that last name Mullins. She's a fine arts photographer in Paris, France. This is Eye on Vision.